The biggest news that so many of us have been waiting for from Printify is finally here. Embroidery is back, and it's better than ever. Why is this huge news? Because embroidery has become one of the most in-demand design styles on Etsy. So for today's video, let's dive in on the demand and trends that would be great for embroidery, and then I'll walk you through step by step on creating a design in Kittl, creating the product in Printify, as well as how to make a mock-up for embroidered designs. In case we haven't met yet, my name is Mandy. I got my start on the handmade side of Etsy many years ago and have since turned that experience into multiple six-figure businesses, including spending the last 2.5 years earning more than $400,000 in revenue with print on demand. So my goal now is to provide you with strategies to simplify the process so that you can stop the overwhelm and start thriving in your entrepreneurial journey. Now, if we look at the data in eRank, we can see that embroidered sweatshirt has been trending on Etsy as a search term very recently. And if we look at past performance, especially during Q4, we can see those searches really climb. If we scroll down for some sub niche ideas, you can see that searches for even mama embroidered sweatshirt, nurse embroidered sweatshirt, all of these with decent average searches, but much lower competition compared to what we normally see, especially in some of these really high demand themes. And then, of course, if we head to Etsy, we can validate this information by running some similar searches and clearly seeing that there are tons of popular now and bestsellers popping up across all of the broad searches that are specific to embroidery. So this means that there's clear demand in the marketplace continuing for this type of style. Now, in terms of available products with embroidery, Printify started with dad hats and even trucker hats. Currently, all embroidery is being done by Fulfill Engine, and I was actually part of the beta group that had early access to try them out. So I made this hat for my husband. He's a lawn guy, so I actually had him pick a hat color that he liked, and I made this Blade Runner design with some two-tone grass that you can see there at the bottom. The details on these were impeccable, even for those tiny little blades of grass that were part of the design. As far as the product itself goes, this is a great hat. It comes in several different color combinations, so there's plenty to choose from and offer to your customers. And of course, we have to talk about the embroidery itself. I have to admit, I was a little skeptical with on demand embroidery, but I was wildly impressed with how it turned out. And the good news is that since embroidery is done with thread and not ink, you don't have as much color discrepancies that traditional direct to garment printing can sometimes be prone to. What you see is pretty much what you get. Beyond these particular hats, I've also sold the dad hat in one of my shops, and it's done well in some of my primary niches. I've gotten great reviews on them, and customer photos of the final product have turned out just as good consistently for them as it did for me. But perhaps what I'm most excited about with Printify's growing catalog of embroidered products are apparel, because that's primarily what I prefer to sell. Printify has now added Gildan 18,000 sweatshirts, and as of this morning when I started recording this, they've also added Gildan 18,500 hoodies. They've also said that more products are on the way as they continue to grow this very popular printing style. Right now, the embroidery area for apparel in particular is limited to the left pocket, but that's okay. We can work with this since there is still plenty of demand for pocket style designs on apparel. The trick with embroidery is that you have to follow the very specific guidelines that are provided. So before we start designing, we want to make sure we know what the requirements are in Printify. Number one, you want to make sure you pay close attention to the size and placement of the print area. You can see this information in Printify in the top left corner when you go into the design window. This is important because once you place your uploaded design into Printify, you cannot resize it, move it, adjust it, nothing. If you need to adjust the design or change it, you've got to delete it, change the design in your design software, and re-upload it. You're also going to want to make sure you fill the space of that design area. So for sweatshirts, we're going to need a design size no bigger than 1200 by 1200 pixels. This is going to be about 4 inches in the final product. So we'll want to plan to, again, really fill that space. Otherwise, they'll scale up the design for us. But it's better if we can do it and see exactly what we're going to get. Number 2 with embroidery are your color options. As I said before, embroidery happens with thread. And for now, you are limited to 14 thread colors to choose from with up to 6 colors per design. I'm actually going to download the design template because those thread colors are going to be attached there, and I'll show you how I color match them easily in the design itself. One other important thing that I want to mention as relates to designing for embroidery. You may have heard of something called digitization. This simply refers to converting a design into a stitch file that an embroidery machine can then use to sew the design onto the garment. This process needs to take place before any design can actually be embroidered. The good news is that with Printify, you don't have to digitize the design before uploading it. Some other platforms for embroidery require doing this yourself, but Printify will do it for you. The caveat, though, is that this creates a small delay the first time the design is ordered. It only happens once per design, unless you go back and make changes to it later. So if you have one new design and it sells 5 times, the first order will have a slight delay while the design is digitized, then it will go into production. The 4 subsequent orders after that will go into production like normal once you submit them, and they won't have a delay since the digitization was already done. Printify says that it can take up to 36 hours for digitization to occur. In my experience, for my embroidered designs that have sold, it took just a few hours for that digitizing to occur the very first time an embroidered item with that design was sold. But just keep in mind that it could take longer for yours. You can negate this delay for customers by ordering a sample of the design first to before there's an order, but that can get pretty spendy if you're doing that for every single design you create. So I recommend just ordering a sample for your first couple designs so that you're comfortable with how it looks and how it works. And then for new designs after that, just make sure you give yourself enough time in the production window on Etsy for new designs to be digitized. Now the fun part. Let's head over to Kittl and make an embroidery design together. First, I've got my artboard sized to 1200 by 1200. Remember that was the size of the design template in Printify. Then I'm going to just drop in a small artboard next to it and upload my thread color file from the design template that I downloaded. You'll see why I do that in just a minute. The key thing with embroidery is that you want bold designs. And if you're going to include text, it also needs to be fairly bold as well so that it can be digitized and embroidered properly. Let's make this a personalized pediatric nurse sweatshirt. Remember, we saw in our e-rank data that embroidered nurse sweatshirts were doing well. There was specifically one for pediatrics as well as several other specialties with nurses. So there could be a whole mess of them that you could go into. For this one, let's shorten the main text to peds. And I'm going to go with kind of that trendy varsity font that I know has been doing really well in designs on Etsy. In Kittl, we'll use the one called Tricot. Now, I need to color match based on my available threads. Let's say for this design, I want to do white lettering on darker sweatshirt colors. The thread isn't actually the usual white hex code. It's an off-white technically. So I'm going to use the little color picker in Kittl to grab the exact match that's on the design template. We can then turn this whole design into a cute Christmas design by adding a little Santa hat over the letter. So I found this one and brought it in from Creative Fabrica. Now, remember, the trick here is that embroidered designs need to be fairly simple, and the colors need to match the available thread colors, right? So I'm going to take this PNG image that I have, and I'm going to vectorize it so that I can alter the colors. And I can do that right here in Kittl. Now you can see once it's been vectorized, that gives me control of each color in the design. And I can use the color picker to correctly match each part of the graphic with the appropriate color from my available options. And then finally, since I said this would be personalized, let's add a name placeholder. I like pairing big, bold fonts with a complementary script font for the additional text for the name. Remember, we don't want anything too small or super scripty, or it won't digitize properly later. So let's go with this Florida Vibes font. Based on Printify's guidance, the design itself needs to be right up against the edges of the template. So again, it fills that space. So we'll just do some minor adjustments and center as needed, and then export the whole thing as a transparent design. I typically make sure the DPI or resolution is set to 300, remove the background, optimize for quality, and then download. Now we're ready to upload this into Printify. As I mentioned, the trick with embroidered designs is that you can't adjust it once it's uploaded. So you kind of want to visualize the placement as you're designing so that it's then placed properly when you upload it. If you take a look at this one, it's sitting a little lower than I would like in terms of distance from the collar. So to edit it, I actually need to go back into my original design, adjust it there, move the image up, download it again, and then remove the original design and replace it with this updated one in Printify. Much better. I typically give it another quick look in the previews, save the product, and then it's ready to be finalized with your listing info in Printify and then published to Etsy. The next notable difference, though, with embroidery is mockups. Now, when it comes to mockups for embroidery, we have to treat them a little differently because we're wanting to make sure that our mockup is realistic to the fact that the design is produced with stitching and not printing. Now, certainly one option is to create a mockup from the print provider, either by downloading the mockups and creating your own by removing the background in your design software. You can also upload a background into Printify and set that as your background for each image type that you want, and then that will be saved with your design in Printify. However, if you followed me for a while, you know that I much prefer the Etsy aesthetic, which basically just means I'm going for a particular look and trendy style that simply cannot be achieved with the options inside Printify. Go look at those listings on Etsy. When we scroll through them, do you see any of those images typically, especially for apparel, that look like what had come from the print provider? You don't. There's a reason for that. Those listings aren't ranking on Etsy. They're not in demand, they're not converting, and they're therefore not what I use because the data tells me that they are not as high performing. So that is a big part of the decision making behind that. Sorry, Printify. I love you, and I promise we're still besties, but I will still be using my own mockups. One of my very favorite Etsy shops for mockups is Mocks by Little Feather. Michelle is the shop owner and just does a phenomenal job of capturing not only a cute and trendy vibe, but also takes extra care to ensure that her mockups are accurate representations of the final product so that we as sellers minimize the risk of negative reviews from customers and also get that really great aesthetic that we know converts very well on the platform. I will link Michelle's shop below along with the exclusive coupon code that she has created just for you as part of my audience. Now you may be thinking, but these are embroidered designs. The digital file looks nothing like stitching. Correct, my friend. Here comes the fun part. I've got two methods for you for getting that digital design onto an embroidered mockup. Number one is just an easy hack. In Printify, you're going to go into the mockup options. Go to the folded mockup, especially for apparel here, which gives you a nice close up of the image. And then you're going to pick one of your colors with a high contrast so that the design is super clear. I'm going to grab this one on navy since the image itself has kind of that white color. And then I'm going to screenshot just the full design. You could download, I'm saving a step here and simply just screenshotting. Don't worry about the angle, we can adjust it later. On a Mac, I'm pressing Command Shift 4 to be able to grab just that specific area that I want. And on a PC, if you've got Windows 10 or later, you'll simply press the Windows key plus Shift plus S to use the little snipping tool. Now, head to your design software. I'm going to head back to Kittl. Start a fresh artboard with the Etsy listing dimensions. I quite often like to use 2500 by 2200 just so that it's not quite square, not quite rectangle. Then add your mockup to the background and then upload your screenshot. Then, still with me, you're going to remove the background on your screenshot so that only the design remains. And voila! Now you have your own stitched design on your mockup and you can adjust it and tilt it as needed. This works for apparel on both regular model mockups like I've got here, as well as this flat light option as well. Repeat this across each of your mockups for your different color options, and you're good to go. Depending on your design, your mockup, or your product, this may not always work in every single case, but it's worked pretty beautifully for most of mine, again, especially for apparel, which can be one of the trickier ones to do. Option number two is actually a method that was developed by Christina over at CU Online. She created a file that you can simply download and then use it on a design tool where you can adjust layers. I'm going to link her video for you below so that you can get the file directly from her, as well as watch her video that walks you through every single step to create your embroidered design file that you can then use on top of your mockups. Her method will give you a little more control by altering the design itself with layers, and it looks very realistic. I don't know how she figured it out. It seems like magic, but it works. It's a few more steps, but she does an excellent job of explaining it, and it's worth checking out, especially in case the quick hack doesn't quite give you the look that you're going for on your mockup. A few other tips as you get started with embroidery. Number one, in terms of pricing, do keep in mind that embroidery is an added cost. They are simply more expensive to produce. At the time of this video, there's about a $3 difference between the traditional direct-to-garment printing and embroidery. Right now, Printify does not charge for digitization, but I would not expect it to stay that way forever since most providers that offer it do charge for it. The good news is that embroidery can typically sell at a higher price point in the marketplace because of the value that it carries from buyers. So when you are pricing your embroidered items, make sure you are factoring in a buffer for those added costs so that you are making the profit that you desire. Number two, make sure you are super clear in your listing that the design is embroidered as it relates to both searches and product information. Remember, this is a highly searched term on Etsy, and you want to make sure that your listings are showing up there. So make sure you got it in your title, your tags, your description, all the places. Additionally, you want to make sure your customer knows that it's embroidered and not just some other type of printing. So I would even mention it in something like a photo card in your listing where you can add in additional details so that they know that your particular design has added value because it's embroidered. And number three, if you're looking to add embroidery to your shop, remember that the same principles of design and demand apply. Don't just create a random vanilla design or a generic seasonal image. You can keep things simple while still connecting your designs to a specific customer identity. It's those deeper connections that lead to higher conversions. I hope that this has been helpful for you and inspired you to go out and create your first embroidered design and listing. Let me know in the comments which embroidered product you are most excited to get listed in your shop. If you want to learn more about my strategies for thriving in your print on demand business, make sure you've got the notifications turned on for my channel so that you don't miss out on any of my free content. And in the meantime, be sure to also check out my Simply Thrive Club membership, where we have a growing and supportive community of fellow print on demand sellers, along with live calls each month and deeper dives on the critical steps for success. Stay focused, my friends, keep taking action, and never stop pursuing excellence in your business. Thanks for watching. I'm so glad you're here, and I'll see you in the next one.